was inspired to talk today based on a conversation I had the other day with a friend of mine who lives in Moscow. Um, I was really anxious to get in touch with her because obviously all the things that are going on there, and she is someone who I've known for many years. And so I was really curious to know like what people on the ground in Moscow are thinking and feeling right now. Um, and long story short, this person is young, she is creative, she is, liberal thinking, incredibly well read and educated and cosmopolitan and bohemian and fusion of different styles and worldly, and has friends and family all over the world. She's extremely well traveled, cultured, educated, like I said. And very soon into the conversation, it becomes clear that she thinks that this war was started by America and is basically like America trying to flex its muscle against Russia. And Putin is doing the best he can to handle a difficult situation, which has a hundreds, centuries long history. And Zelensky is the crazy one, and he's a meth addict, and doing political theater to kind of manipulate the whole world. And I am just like, my jaw is just dropping listening to her, because this is someone who I thought I knew and trusted, and I assumed would be on the same page, that this was kind of started by some crazed, deranged, and I'm just stealing words from our news outlets here, right? That Putin is this deranged guy going nuts in his bunker, bombing innocent civilians. And when I presented that narrative to her, she laughed. She laughed and said, "Your American propaganda machine is working quite well." So, I'm not here to speak on geopolitics. I don't know what's going on, obviously. I'd like to think that when it comes to matters of politics and war and diplomacy, that there is some kind of truth to be sought. And I really hope that there are well-intentioned humans in power that are trying to do that and dismantle toxic propaganda. But the point for this Dharma talk was just that it shook so many of my core beliefs. This interaction, we talk about coming from a place of not knowing, right? A lot of our Buddhist texts talk about not knowing is the most intimate. And in this moment where I was speaking to an educated, artistic, young, what I thought was, liberal thinking, worldly person, having a completely different narrative of this world, of the world stage, it really shook me. And it really made me think of what it truly means to let go of knowing and to be open to bearing witness to the universe. I'm not now converted to a Putin supporter. Please do not think anywhere close to that. But, some things are easy to uproot and shake up in our lives. Like maybe I want something for dinner, my friend or partner wants something else for dinner. That's like an easy change. That's an easy, okay, well, I guess I can maybe bend. But things like this, like talking about what the sources of good and evil are in the world, like that's a big one. And it really shook me, like I said, and it made me think of a koan in particular that really aims at how do we let go of these really what we assume are just basic, fundamental things that we can know about the world and about ourselves. So the koan is again from the Blue Cliff record. I think the last koan I talked about is from this one as well. The Blue Cliff record was compiled thanks to Sean here. We just did some research to find out exactly when it was compiled. I think it said like early 12th century, so 1125, 900 years ago. I just get such a kick out of that. 900? I think it's about 900. A guy named Secho, who's like a major person in our lineage, a major Zen master. Secho put these together and he offers a lot of commentary. So this is case 81 of the Blue Cliff record. And of course, I did not use a bookmark. Please forgive me. But, sorry. This is called Yaoshan or Yakusan in Japanese. Yakusan's shooting the Elk of Elks. So here's the main case, the main story of the koan. A monk asked Yakusan, on a level field in the shallow grass, the elk and deer form a herd. How can one shoot the Elk of Elks? Yakusan said, look, an arrow. The monk let himself fall down. Yakusan said, attendant, drag this dead fellow out of here. The monk then got up and ran out. Yakusan said, this fellow playing with a mud ball. What end will there be to it? And then Secho comments, saying, though he lived for 3 steps, after 5 steps he had to die. What the fuck? Okay, so let's just go line by line here. And you'll see how this doesn't necessarily explain the Russia, Ukraine, US situation here, but insofar as we're talking about opening up to what our deepest knowings are. And if we're going to pursue this Buddha way of not knowing, how do we do that? How do we really uproot everything? And that's what the monk starts out by saying, right? So the monk comes in, we assume he comes into Doksan or interview, just like we do with some of the teachers here, and he sits down and he starts by saying, on a level field. So even just right there, I love these koans because it's basically like poetry. And I remember in high school when I first was learning about poetry, they really emphasized, look at every word. Every single word is purposeful. And so really try to milk as much meaning and practice out of each word that you read. So on a level field, right? Not just a field, he chose to say level, right? Which I think addresses the oneness, equanimity. Just oneness. It's level, everything equal, everything one. Which is the nature of our universe, right? So this level field, our existence of oneness, in the shallow grass, right? So often in these koans, grass is used, or weeds is used to talk about thoughts, concepts, ideas, desires, attachments, greed, anger, ignorance, the 3 poisons, the grass, the stuff that we get lost in, the stuff that, sticks us with burrs and gives us ticks, right? It's kind of a metaphor for the separation and attachments that we have to things and makes us suffer. So even though we're on a level field, this empty field of oneness, there's shallow grass. There are these grasses that give us problems. The elk and deer form a herd. So I think I see these elk and deer also as the concepts that we put together, right? So you could say that the elk and deer are feeding off of these grasses, these ideas, these concepts that pop up. So we have the little ideas and categorizations that we have about the world, and then we build these concepts. We feed these elk and deer beliefs about the world. Putin's the bad guy. America's the good guy. Zelensky, the poor victim. Right? All these are elk and deer that we're building in our heads. Uh, Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. They're built off of these grasses that are just ideas in our head. So the elk and deer form a herd. How can one shoot the elk of elks? And some other translations say the king of elks, right? So this is the main buck. This is the dude. He's been sharpening his horns. He's got giant horns. He's protecting the whole herd. He is I guess I should say they are the biggest one, the toughest one, the scariest one, the most protective one. So each one of us, I think part of Zazen is figuring out, like, what is this Elk of Elks for me? What is the biggest, most inhibiting concept that limits my life, that creates suffering for myself and others? Right? Maybe it's a trauma that you experienced when you were young. Maybe it's narcissism, and it's just that thing that's always there. Maybe it's anger. Or maybe I think the Zen perspective would probably say that this Elk of Elks is the basic idea that you are a thing, that you exist. Right? We know that the Buddha said what he discovered was anatman, which translates as no self. It's like impossible to think about. What is that? What could that possibly mean? That I am not a thing. I'm here. Look at me. I can see myself. I can look in the mirror, and there I am. I can ask you what my name is, and you can tell me. How could I not be a thing? It doesn't make much logical sense. And that's why we really emphasize this body practice, this embodied manifestation of no self, having that physical experience of shooting that Elk of Elks, letting that Elk of Elks die. Because that Elk of Elks, whether it's trauma, whether it's anger, whether it's just the basic sense of self, it's gonna fight. And that dude, that chick, that woman, that female, that they is very strong. And they will do whatever it takes to protect the herd of concepts and ideas that I have. So how do I get rid of that? This is what the monk is saying. So this is a pretty dope question coming from this monk, right? Like, he's obviously been practicing for a while, or at least he's been studying Zen, so he kind of knows a little bit about concepts and ideas and attachments, and he's really earnest, right? He knows that, like, I still am holding on to things. There's still some strong sense of something that I'm holding on to, whether it's a trauma or a sense of self, whatever it is. How do I get rid of that? How do I let go? How do I act freely in the world without being held down with this major basic concept that's holding my life down? I think it's a really genuine question. So then Yakusan says, look, an arrow. Right here, right now, whatever you're doing, petting your dog, listening to a Dharma talk, making breakfast, going to the bathroom in the morning, whatever it is, you hurt yourself, you're angry, whatever's going on right now, being here, completely losing yourself in this moment is how you kill everything. That's how you die. Insofar as dying is enlightenment, right? That's kind of a hard thing to shift with these koans. They talk a lot about dying, and dying actually, in some cases, is a good thing. In other cases, it's a bad thing, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But that's essentially what we want to do when we sit Zazen. right? Zazen allows us to completely lose everything into this moment, right? Let go of your concepts about meditation, let go of, visualizing or thinking about other things, and just be this moment. And if we do that over and over and over and over again, um, we notice that we don't even have to shoot the Elk of Elks. The Elk of Elks just kind of falls. No need to shoot anything. So that's what Yakusan is saying. He's saying, look, right here, right now, whatever you're doing is the arrow. You can kill it right away. All your elks, all your deer, all your grasses, they're empty. And if we can just take the time to sit and really be this moment, then we can see that. So that's Yakusan's teaching. He says, look, an arrow. Look, an arrow is probably more animated than that. And then the monk lets himself fall, right? So you'll see, if for those of you who are doing koan practice, there's like this kind of interaction between student and teacher, and sometimes it requires you to do an action or a gesture or something. So I think that's what the monk here is trying to do. He's like, watch me die, and he falls. And there's a little disagreement as I've been researching this koan from teachers. I know the way we've studied it, it's kind of like a little over the top. When you go into these meetings with the teacher, you don't want to be like pantomiming. You don't want to be like acting like, oh, look how dead I am. Like that's kind of stinky, like we say, right? Like you don't need to be doing any pantomime or acting anything. Just really be genuine to the moment. But some other teachers say that it was actually kind of a good thing, right? Like Yakusan saying, look, an arrow. So he's like presenting a thing and the guy kind of reacts spontaneously to it. So, maybe it's an okay answer, right? So he's saying, yes, just this moment I can die. And he shows that by falling down. So let's just say that's a good answer. That's fine. He's playing along. So then Yakusan says, attendant, drag this dead fellow out of here, right? Or basically it's kind of like it's like a test. He's like poking the student. He's like, all right, like enough of this playing around. Just get this guy out of here. He's going to pantomime. Like, I don't have time for this. Just to see how the monk would react. And that also has another aspect. Like we were saying, sometimes they talk about dying as a good thing, letting go of the self. But then the important part, and a lot of our sutras and a lot of our things that we chant point to this, is that that's half the battle, right? Coming in touch and cultivating no self, right? This absolute truth of no self, really allowing the Elk of Elks to die. That's just half the battle. That's the first part, learning how to completely die. And then from there, how do we act? How do we manifest that? How do we manifest this absolute truth of no self in our relative universe, where I see Marjorie and Sean and Teddy and Kim and Laura, and I have to feed myself, and we have wars, and we have starvation, and we want to help people. We take that bodhisattva vow to be of service, which requires acknowledging separation, right? So how do we die and find life in that death? That is the Buddha way, right? The dying part's fine, and it's essential. And that's why we sit so much. That's why we see teachers. That's why we do koans. That's a huge part of it. But then how do we manifest life in that death, in every moment? And I think that's the question the Yakusan is asking, right? When he says, attendant, drag this dead dude out. Like, I get it. You get the whole dying part. Cool. Now show me how you manifest that. But instead of showing him, the monk stands up and runs out, right? Like I imagine he's just like scared shitless. Like this teacher just totally rejected me. He's bringing in his attendant to drag me out. Like, I need to get out of here. And he just runs away. Instead of maybe being like, no, I'm good. How you doing? Just be here in the moment. Just be genuine, right? I think Yakusan was trying to test the genuineness of this guy's understanding. Because anyone can be like, yes, the death of the self, so I'm going to pretend to die, right? Like that's all in the head. That's all concepts. But to truly, genuinely, authentically, physically embody that, I think, that's the hard part. That's the hard part, to get out of our heads and really just be here. So that's what I think. If he had said, attendant, drag this dude out, and it was me, I probably just would have got up and I'd be like, no, I'm good, I'm playing. So what are you doing later today? Just be here in your life. So simple. It's nothing special. Just this moment is an arrow to kill all of your elk and deer. Just fully be present in your life. How do we do that? I think Zazen. That's what works for me sometimes. So the monk stands up and runs out, and then Yakusan says, this fellow playing with a mud ball, what end will there be to it? So again, this is another kind of censure, we say, criticism, just kind of his overall comment about how that interaction just went down. So a mud ball is not a snowball, and it's not a Nerf ball. It's dirty, it's annoying, it's gross, maybe it smells bad, right? So it's like trying to be something. It's trying to be a snowball. It's dirty, it's stinky, it's trying to be something. So that's what I think he's saying. This monk, he's got good questions. He's talking about the level field. He knows about oneness. He like knows some things. He has some ideas about what the way is. He's like definitely practicing. But he's still playing with mud balls. He doesn't really quite get what this life in death means. Um, That was awesome. Sorry, everybody. um, Teddy said the internet is playing with mud balls, pretending to be a real internet. It was funny. Sorry about that. So, yeah. When will there be an end to this playing of mud balls? So, I think you could see that as Yakusan being like, man, all these people who are like trying to do Zen but don't really get it. That's like one way to interpret it. But I think the most important part is to realize that, yeah, we're all playing with mud balls. We're all empty. And anything we do with our lives, this life that we give in death, it's all mud balls. Another koan says something like, everything is just wind going about like this, or something like that. So I think it really speaks to the emptiness. Everything we think is real, everything we think our lives is just a mud ball. That's all we're doing, playing with mud balls. And I know that might sound a little bit bleak, but I think with practice and the cultivation of that emptiness, it actually is quite light and brings a lot of equanimity to our lives, to realize that we're all just playing with mud balls, and that even our Elk of Elks can be fell. So then Secho, the dude who put these together, just really quickly, he comments at the end saying, though he lived for 3 steps, after 5 steps, he had to die. So again, there's different interpretations here. Some teachers comment that they're talking about the interaction, that he was alive for 3 steps with the question, right? That's a good question. He's like bringing the practice up, the elk and the grass and the shooting, and like those are good steps. But then once he started acting, doing the whole dead thing, like then it was just dead. Like he didn't get it. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation that I think is a little bit better refers to him running out, right? So he ran out trying to preserve himself, right? He's like, oh God, he didn't like my answer. I'm just gonna go, right? So for 3 steps, he kind of keeps his sense of self alive, that Elk of Elks, trying to do whatever he can to just keep his, I did okay, I'm good, I'm a good monk. Keep that idea alive. But then by 5 steps, whatever went down in that interaction, you could say, like Yakusan's words were so strong that he will experience that great death. Or even more generally and more accurately, all of us, if we keep practicing, we may be able to keep our thoughts alive for a little bit. All these elks and deer that we put together, we can try to give them as much life, permanence, meaning as we can. But because the nature of our life is a level field, an empty field full of mud balls, then we're all going to die. That's just the nature of our life. Our ideas are empty. Our attachments are empty. And no matter how many mud balls we want to play with, no matter how much energy we try to give to keep those ideas and concepts and attachments alive, they're going to die. Everything is impermanent. We're all going to reach that 5th step, and everything's going to go away.